Welcome to Fusion Forum, the podcast nourishing your creative soul, sponsored by Fusion Theater Company, Albuquerque's own professional producing theater company located in the land of enchantment. And that would be the great state of New Mexico. Today, I have actor, writer, arts administrator, and of course, Fusion family member, Blair Nodelman from Boston. How are you, Blair? Welcome to Fusion Forum.
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So you are in Boston. Actually, you've made your home there for several years now. How is the city of Boston dealing with COVID-19 right now?
It's interesting. Boston has been, I think, actually pretty responsive as far as the situation is concerned, especially in the arts world. I think there was a lot of really active leadership and stewarding what seemed right and seemed like the overall goal of keeping everyone safe and healthy pretty early on. And it's been really interesting to have that perspective, especially from an internal point of view as an arts administrator, to see that like decision making happen in real time.
Right.
But it's been really inspiring, if anything, to watch and to be a part of.
So you graduated actually with a graduate degree in arts admin not too long ago, but you've been working in a position at Emerson for a while. This is a seismic shift for the arts. I mean, this is unprecedented. So, from your perspective, from an administration point of view, how do you think we're going to move forward and through this? What's your gut?
I think, well, I want to say first off that I am in a particularly lucky and privileged position because, I work for an organization called Arts Emerson, which is housed under Emerson College. And because we work with the college and are in partnership with the college, we've all been financially fine. We've been working, we've had a lot of resources to continue our messaging and our mission. And as an artist and an arts administrator, that is not the norm as of right now. So there's a huge
Absolutely.
amount of
Yeah.
gratitude for that. Um,
Yes.
and the thing that I've been thinking about, particularly moving forward and sort of where my bread and butter has been for a while, is in a lot of new play development. I'm thinking about how playwrights in particular who were pitching or producing new work perhaps will have limited, even more limited opportunity when this is over because so much work is being pushed to next season. There might not be
Right.
open slots. So I worry a lot about that aspect of it and how we'll come out of it, nurturing and upholding young artists, new plays, new stories, particularly. And a lot of these artists in particular are already financially vulnerable because of the situation and were before. So I think that's where my biggest concern lies. I'm also sort of interested to see how people will feel about gathering in general in space,
Yeah.
and when people will feel ready to come back into community in a physical realm within a theater, and what that will look like
I
and what
want.
that will feel like.
Yeah, I wonder that too. I mean, it's you're bound to have some sort of PTSD around this whole scenario, and when you can sort of breathe easily in order to take the work in, you might be gathering, but you might be blocked mentally and emotionally to a certain extent. It will be interesting. But the great thing right now, the upside, I suppose, is this interesting intersection between science, medicine, and the arts. It seems that these three aspects of human existence right now are what is important and sort of buoying us up right now. We may not like what's coming from the scientific world, but we need to know it, and we need the artistic expression and connection in order to cope.
Yeah, I saw something, I think it was on Twitter, that I thought was, it was pointed, but I found it pretty resonant in that in this time, remember that everyone here turned to artists for entertainment. As far as like
Absolutely. Yeah.
Netflix or Amazon Prime, I mean, was very, I, in a way, it is sort of the unifier in this moment. And it has been really interesting to watch either people that I've worked with in the past or different theater companies in Boston in particular or around the country, how they're still creating and producing art and theater in sort of this digital realm. It's been
Right.
fascinating to watch, and sort of see develop, and how quickly it's come together. Even more so that the resources were there, people leapt to them, and we're still making things, which is
Right.
really encouraging.
Right. Um, if you can explain a little bit about what an arts administrator does, or maybe a little bit about your education in that. I think it's somewhat of a nebulous term for particularly people outside of the arts. They equate it maybe with being an executive director of an arts organization, but that's very specific, and it I think encompasses a lot more. So maybe you could speak to that a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I started primarily in practicum. I graduated from Tufts 3 years ago now, studying drama and American studies, but primarily focusing on acting and performance as a communicative tool. And then just this past year, I graduated from Emerson College with a master's. And what prompted me to pursue that master's, so my master's degree was in public relations. And I had been working up until this point for about 2 years at Arts Emerson as a marketing and communications fellow. Um, and that has since transitioned into a full time position. And I'm in my third year with the organization. And arts admin it's a broad term. I think it's an umbrella term. My expertise is particularly in marketing. I've done marketing as far as promotions, I've done content, I've done community engagement, I've done outreach. I mean, there's so many moving parts of that. I've been heavily involved in an artistic process for an upcoming series that Arts Emerson will be doing during the coronavirus times. I've worked with a new a theater company that produces new work by New England playwrights for several years doing marketing, but mostly email and social media, and very different from my daytime role. So I think arts admin is a broad term, and there's
Right.
expertise within that. So, for instance, I would not be particularly well versed at development at this point or
Uh huh.
fundraising, but
Right. Right.
have worn many hats within the marketing world. Um,
Right.
and so it's sort of a weird melding of like artistic and creative minds with not, I want to say, traditional business models, because it's not, but sort of what
Yes.
you anticipate any other company having. Just the priority is the art, which is a
Right.
huge priority shift, in what guides your work every day. That's kind
Right.
of loosely what it is.
No, that's great. That's a great overview. I was reminiscing, of course, before we started this podcast about how long I've known you. And we worked together, and I've known you since you were a student at Albuquerque Academy. And one of the productions you were in that is near and dear to my heart, but has an interesting sort of 360 to me is an adaptation of The Birds by Aristophanes. The adaptation was done by the poet Gwendolyn McEwen, and we had a sort of Occupy Wall Street uh, bent to it, if you would. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, we're sort of circled back with these socioeconomic issues that were explored in that piece, and almost times 100 now. Um, and I know that you've also been involved in some grassroots political campaigns and so forth. I mean, how do you think politics is going to change from this? We're already looking at these digital conventions and so forth. How do you think grassroots politics might shift out of this?
I think what's interesting is that so much of grassroots activism is already online. Most of us don't live in the same city. We're trying to communicate and coordinate across state lines, sometimes across countries. So we've already been using Zoom. We've already been using all these technologies that sort of everyone else is just catching up to. I think the
Interesting.
difference, yeah, I think the difference is now is that we're a little bit, everyone's exhausted by what's going on. And there's so many unknowns that it's hard to predict what will come next. But I think grassroots activism in particular, and when not attached to a politician necessarily, I think it'll become even more imperative. I think it's very clear what our issues are if it wasn't clear before, and that issue based grassroots activism is necessary. An organization that I've partnered with many times called Never Again Action, which is against ICE and for immigration reform, they've been still protesting throughout this, but they've done it all from cars. So they drive around ICE detention centers honking their horns rather than going out and marching. And so I think we've already had the tools of how to think quickly and rapidly with the
Right.
resources already available to us. So I think it's hard to know where it will go simply because there are so many unknowns, but there is like a really amazing force moving forward. And a lot of the same people who are part of grassroots activism are the people who are setting up mutual aid funds. There is a feature in the New York Times about the Boston Mutual Aid Fund, and the three people featured I knew personally, just from work I had done in the past. And so I think these people are very well equipped to think quickly and to respond to the moment. And we've been doing that for so long already that
Yeah.
it's only going to improve, I think, from here. I mean, it's unfortunate that this is the circumstances in which it improves and people are listened
Right.
to, but regardless.
Right. So, you have been in a number of fusion productions, including several during the Festival of the Seven, and also Humble Boy by Charlotte Jones. And that was a wild ride because you stepped into the role of Rosie in an emergency situation. Basically, the actress who was cast had an emergency, health emergency, and you went on. I think I contacted you at 5. You went on stage at 8. And within 24 hours, you also pretty much had that script down. Was that a shocking roller coaster or enjoyable for you?
I think it's my favorite party story still to this day. um, I I sometimes forget that happened.
Right,
I
right.
I think it was definitely shocking at the time. I still don't know how I did that. I think part of it too. I think the way that I don't think I've ever memorized a script that quickly in my life, but I think the reason that I was able to is I'd been a rehearsal stand-in for so many weeks, and so I had watched it over and over again. And I think just by listening and watching and already knowing it pretty well, the words came much easier to me than I think it would have in any other case. It also helped
Right,
that it was like normal dialogue and wasn't particularly stylized. Um,
right, right.
but yeah, that was uh I remember I think Dennis called me at like 5 o'clock and was like, "What are you doing tonight?" I was like, "I'm at home. I'm about to finish my senior year of high school. I don't know, nothing." He's like, "Great. Could you like come to the theater for just a hot second?" Um, yeah, and then the next day I was memorized, and then I ended up finishing out the run, which was
Yeah,
wild, and going to Santa Fe.
yeah.
And that's how I got my EMC card. So you never know
That's
where the world's gonna take
that's
you.
wonderful. Yeah, yeah. So then you went off to Tufts and you studied acting. And let me ask you, so you have these different passions in your life. Let's just look at one little window here. Let's say the acting, and how does it intersect with your interest in politics? Or are those realms completely and utterly separate in your life, or do they mesh in some way?
Oh, I think politics is just theater. And I think that's why I understand it so well, and I'm able to sort of parse through what people are saying and what they're not saying. I think because I'm trained to pick up subtext, I'm trained to know how things should look and how things should be quite literally staged. I remember once I was offered an internship on a campaign because of my theater skills, because they were you could come to an event and tell us what looks good and like how we should set the stage quite literally. Um, and so I think, yeah, they're totally interrelated. And I think one of the things that always reminds me of that is Tufts is very big on theater history in their drama major. And in my ancient Greek and medieval theater class, my professor was giving a lecture about ancient Greek theater, and she told us that what would happen in Greece is that the men or whoever was eligible to vote would go and hear
Right,
about what they were going to vote for, and then they'd watch a play about it, about the issue,
right.
and then they would go
Hmm.
vote. And I was like, these things have been so connected. I mean, if you watch a debate, it's all theater. It's just completely a theatrical experience. And so for me, that helps both in understanding it, but also bring some levity to it because I know that
Right.
that's not what you're seeing is not all that is happening. There's so much happening quite like backstage, and in the lead up. So for me, yeah, there I think my skills in theater have not only helped me interpret politics, but perform within it.
That's
To a
great.
yeah, it's I find it really funny actually, the correlation in that relationship.
Right. So your co-star, back we're going back to the birds at Albuquerque Academy, Elliot Hartman. You and Elliot are still good pals, and you actually started a sort of online digital enterprise. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's funny. So, Elliot and I are have been friends since we were 11, which I find very funny. Um, and since this whole pandemic has happened, I think we've talked more than we have in the past year,
Right,
just by virtue of having time. But we were just on a FaceTime conversation, um, and I was working on a show that was supposed to premiere in Boston that was postponed called Nosferatu the Vampire, and a very good friend of mine had written it. It was a brand new play. I had good friends directing it, in it. I mean, it was just like the creme de la creme of my Boston theater community. And I was really remiss that it wasn't going to have the support it wanted. Separately,
right,
Elliot was talking about how there was a play that he wanted to do just a reading of on Zoom, just so he could hear it out loud as a director, since he's sort of taken more of a directing turn. And then we realized that this could be a series, it could be a thing beyond what we were anticipating. So we've branded ourselves, we have a logo, it feels very official, we have an email address.
excellent,
We've called it Homesick Play Project, and the goal is to give new plays a place to be heard, depending on what the playwright wants. Sometimes, for instance, Nosferatu was set for a full production, so that's what the playwright wanted and wants to see the play go. So we're giving it a broader stage. We're partnering with HowlRound, the Theater Commons Journal, and they're helping us produce and live stream a virtual production of that show, versus
fantastic.
some yeah, versus some other playwrights that we've been in contact with who just want a closed reading, just so they can hear it out loud and continue on their work. And yeah, it's been very exciting, and I've learned a lot about live streaming that I never knew before. So much new tech, uh, and it's been really, really wonderful to connect with artists from all over the country, from our different circles, um, actors, directors, dramaturgs, copywriters. I mean, people like will take, and if anyone is read someone who's interested in sound. It's like, I don't know how this would work, but I would love to figure it out. Like, me too. I also would love to know how sound design would work in this world. Um,
Yeah.
so it's been very, very cool. And it's interesting because Elliot and I haven't collaborated on anything since we were 18. So what is that, 7 years ago? Um,
Right.
so it's very sweet in a way to like return back to the person that I made most of my art with
I
in
love
middle
it.
school and high school. Yeah.
I'm back with Blair Nodelman, and we're going to talk a little bit about your passion for writing. You have a writing page, the Blair Necessities, and I've absolutely loved your latest installment here, and fantastic writing in part two, the whole reveal and the way you used a sort of episodic structure to flip back and forth in time. I thought it was not only clever, but it really added a punch to the piece. So, where do you see Blair Necessities going, and where do you see your writing go?
Yeah. So I started it's a Substack, and which is a really lovely platform for writers because it essentially you create your own newsletter, your own publication. And if you have enough subscribers, you can also introduce a paywall. And so it's a great way for freelance writers to continue to write and practice writing and earn money potentially off of their writing. And you're not beholden to pitching and hoping that a publication will pick it up. So it's a great resource for any writer who's sort of looking to just publish things, whether they want to be paid or not. But I started it because I had had some personal essays and op-eds published in the past and have been really eager to have more things published, but also in that same vein didn't want to rely on, I wouldn't say gatekeeping, but I had too many ideas and didn't know where to put them. Um, and I recently went to France for 2 weeks, somehow between the strikes and Corona, in like a very specific window where nothing was wrong, and everything about my trip was absolutely fine logistically. And then on either end of it, the world ended. So I don't know how I got so lucky, but I've been thinking a lot about that luck. Um, and not needing to travel and go to work in the same way that I was, I've had a lot of time to do some self reflection. So I started the Blair Necessities. I used to think that's what the song was called when I was very little.
Oh,
I
that's
thought the
cute.
Bare Necessities was the Blair
Right,
Necessities. I was heartbroken when I found out otherwise. Um,
right.
and so I kind of started this Substack as a challenge to myself to continue to write. And then in particular started this series, which I've called Release the Hounds, which I called it that because I just needed to get the hounds out of my head of these thoughts. I was actually standing on a patio, I want to say maybe 2 weeks ago, and I was talking to my dad on the phone, um, smoking a cigarette from a pack of cigarettes that I had bought when I was in France. And I realized that there was this sort of, I don't know, there was something really interesting about smoking a pack of Algerian cigarettes on a patio in Boston that I had bought in France. There was like this weird thing that just sort of got me going, and made me want to write about the trip for the first time. Um,
Right.
and I guess my writing, I don't know where it's going to go. A lot of it's been personal essay, and I think I'm trying to push my style and what the style looks like. Um, I think more recently it's been a little bit more fluid and more episodic and a little bit more lyrical, which I've been enjoying
That's
rather
great.
than strictly narrative. Eventually, maybe I'll write a play. I've never done it before. I'm not very
I
good
would
at
love
dialogue.
that.
A
I would
dialogue is
love
not my
that.
forte, but I'm going to try. I've put a challenge to myself at some point in the future I will write a play. It will not be good, and I will have say that I have done it. So
That's,
that's the goal with the writing. I guess I'm just sort
I
of
love it.
fiddling around. Yeah.
That's great. So obviously you lived in Albuquerque for quite a few years. What do you miss about it? And what do you carry sort of in your back pocket about it as you venture off into the world?
I miss a lot about Albuquerque. I think every time I go home to see my family, there's just a wash of calm that I don't necessarily get. I think it's the open skies, to be honest, just like a horizon line that never seems to end, that I find very
Right,
calming. It's hard to get that in a city. There's tall buildings, it's cloudy. I think the only time I really feel that when I'm in Boston is if I go to the coast or get out of town a little bit. But it's interesting. I especially because I was grew up primarily in the Bay Area and then moved to Albuquerque when I was 11 and then spent my, like, adolescence there and really forming my identity in this place that I was not from. I think I miss sort of the freedoms that that allowed me and, like,
right.
exploring identity and what that looks like and how you weasel your way into yourself, essentially. Um,
Yeah,
and I miss this, like, you can feel the art, I guess, like, it makes sense why so many artists go there, and why they continue to, whether you're a writer or a theater maker or a musician. It is a retreat in many ways for me now, to go home and I just love the textures. I don't know, there's just no other place like it. I remember my first year of college, I came home for Thanksgiving, and I didn't really have culture shock moving to New England, but I remember when I got to the Sunport, it was the first time I had been home since I had left, and I had, like, extreme culture shock being home. I was like, "What is this place?" And I
right,
think that's when I realized how unique it is, and so I miss that for sure. I miss that sense of exploring identity that is sort of hard to find in more complicated places.
right. Yeah, no, I know, well, you know this. I tell my students a lot that this is a place to come back to never forget as an artistic home because there's something very divinely, artistically energetic about it. And you can plug in to your creativity in a sort of pure, uninterrupted way that's so valuable. I'm going to give you a couple questions. They're part of the quarantine speed round. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. Um, what are you grateful for today?
Today I am grateful for well, tomorrow's my birthday. Um,
Oh, Blair,
so
happy birthday!
so today I've been very thankful for and grateful for sort of the the slow trickling in of shipments from my parents from opposite ends of the country, um, and my boyfriend being very kind and trying to figure out like how to make tomorrow different from every other day. Um,
Right.
so that's been very nice and very weird to sort of figure out. But I've
That's
yeah,
great.
definitely grateful for that.
What expectations of normal have you let go of today?
It's interesting. So today, actually, my office gave us the day off. They were like, "Please, if you would like it, as like a nice mental health break," which I really
Yeah,
appreciated. So today, I sort of let go of like needing to check my email. I don't think I've checked it really all day, even though it's a work day. Um, and I'm also letting go a lot of how productive I need to be. Um, Generally, but I think today I've really felt that, and I focused a lot on cleaning my home and making things nice so I don't have to worry about it tomorrow or on Sunday, which has been very
that's
lovely.
great. Yeah. So let me ask you this. How does acting or the process of acting or being an actor, how has that brought a different perspective to general life to you?
Um, I think the biggest thing that acting has given me is a sense of empathy and how I'm able to read people.
Yeah.
Um, I think I've become very in tune with people's emotions, and sometimes that can be a double-edged sword because then I internalize those emotions. I feel often like a sponge in that regard, so I have to be sort of
Right.
careful. Like, I don't think I would be a good social worker because I couldn't leave work where it needed to be. I think I soak up too much from
Right.
people. But at the same time, it allows me to really effectively communicate and figure out what people need in a given situation. It's made me really adept in like emergency situations when those have arisen. Um, and I think it teaches you, at least it's taught me quite a bit about space as well, and being
Yeah.
aware of my body and people in space, which has been very helpful in this 6 feet apart sort of situation. um,
That's a great observation. Yeah.
yeah, it's just like understanding space and how it is filled is something that I think about a lot. I think a lot of my, especially in college, I sort of came to the realization that my best acting came from a physical place and then an emotional place. I sort of needed to figure out what the physicality was, or figure out what it felt, what the words felt like in my body before I could have them emotionally. And I think that's from my experience as a dancer and sort of flowing in and out of different physicalities. So I think that's the other thing that it's taught me. Maybe that's helped with interior design. I don't know. Maybe it's aesthetics.
That's
It's probably correlated, but I would say it's the empathy and understanding space in a really interesting way.
well put. So, Blair, I want to thank you so much for indulging us in this podcast today. And also, I really have to thank you. This podcast would not be existing, nor would it be on Apple Podcasts and so forth without your great skill and help along the way. So,
Well,
thank you so much for that.
of course, I'm happy to
All
help.
right. Great. Well, we wish you a most spectacular happy birthday in one of the oddest contexts I'm sure that you will experience in life. We love you. We send you health and all of our best wishes. Thank you, Blair.
Thank you so much.